السلام عليكم. Engineer Mouaz AlShahmeh, software engineer and developer with experience of Flutter about 5 years old, and in Dart or any programming language other about over 10 years. What we talk in this video, we talk about Dart programming language. We will talk about basic Dart program, important concepts, keywords, variables, default value, late variables, final and const, built-in types, numbers, strings, Booleans, list, set, map, runs and grapheme clusters, symbols. We will talk about functions, parameters, the main function, functions as first-class object, anonymous functions, lexical scope, lexical clusters, testing functions for equality, return values, operators, arithmetic operators, equality and relational operators, type test operators, assignment operators, logical operators, bitwise and shift operators, conditional expressions, cascade notation, other operators, control flow statements, if and else, for loops, while, break and continue, switch and case, assert. We will talk about also exceptions, throw, catch, finally. We'll talk about classes, object-oriented in Dart language, using class members, using constructors, getting an object type, instance variables, constructors, methods, abstract classes, implicit interfaces, extending class, extension methods, enumerated types, adding features to class mixins, which is similar to protocol in Swift language, for example, class variables and methods. We will talk about generics, why use generics, using collection literals, using parameterized types with constructors, generic collections and the types they contain, restricting the parameterized, using generic methods, libraries and visibility, using libraries, implementing libraries, asynchrony support, handling features, declaring async functions, handling streams, generators, callable classes, isolates. We'll talk about type divs, metadata and comments, single line comments, multi-line comments, documentation comments, and summary. All of this we will talk about in this video. What is Dart programming language? Dart is programming language from Google, is official programming language for Flutter technology. We talked about Flutter in many times previous. For example, there is a full course for Flutter in Udemy. You can refer it in description details in this video. And many videos in our channel on YouTube. You can refer it. Dart programming language is easy to use, familiar to you if you come from any programming language. What you need to program, you need initially Dartpad or any IDE integrated development environment. For example, VS Code, Visual Studio Code, or Android Studio, or Xcode, or IntelliJ, anyone you deal with it, no problem. We don't need IDE in this video. We use only Dartpad. A basic program Dart. The following code uses many Dart's most basic features. Print integer. This function. Let's see what this function do. Now, if you want two references, we use it two references in this video. One is important. Is Dart Apprentice first edition. This in 2020 in Dart Null Safely 2.10. Beautiful and useful, valuable book you can find on Amazon. Dart Apprentice first edition, beginning programming with Dart. Another book, if you want to over programming concepts, data structures and algorithms in Dart. This new edition in Dart 2.15, latest version of Dart, null safely already, data structures and algorithms in Dart. We don't talk about these concepts in this video. We talk it in little or shortcut about these concepts. Now return to Dartpad. Here we find this. We will talk about functions later. Print integer, pass parameter, name it parameter a number, then print the number. In main function, all of these concepts we will talk about this later on this video. Here we find main into main. So this is a problem. We need to delete main. Here, if we run the code, we find the number is 42. Declare value. We will talk about all of this. Print integer, call function, and the result is the number is 42. This is a comment. We'll talk about comments. Single comment line. Void function, don't return any value. Integer data type. print handy way to display output, string literal, variable name or expression. This concatenate strings into each other. Main special required top-level function where apps execution starts. Var this is introduction about Dart programming language. What is important concepts? Everything you can place in variable is an object, and every object is instance of class. Even numbers, functions, and null are objects, with exception of null. All objects inherit from object class. Dart 2.12 is using null safety. Language versions, if you want to language versions, as in Flutter, you can refer to Flutter course to understand this environment SDK. Two changes in each release from 2.0 to 2.16. Dart is strongly typed, type annotation optional. If you enable null safely, variables cannot contain null. When you want to explicitly say that any type is allowed, use object. Dart supports generic types like list of integers, for example, or strings. Any other. Dart supports top-level functions such as main, as well as functions tied to a class or object, static and instance methods, respectively. You can also create functions within functions, nested or local functions. Similarly, Dart supports top-level variables, as well as variables tied to a class or object, known as folders or properties. Unlike Java, Dart does not have keywords public, protected, and private. If an identifier starts with an underscore, it's private to its library. For details, see libraries and visibility. You can refer this issue on GitHub to more information. Identifiers can start with a letter or underscore, followed by any combination of those characters plus digits, similar to any programming language. Dart has both expressions, which have runtime values, and statements which don't. For example, condition expressions has a value of expression 1 or 2. Compare that to an if-else statement, which has no value. That tool can report two kinds of problems, warnings and errors. Warnings are just indications that your code may not work, but they don't prevent your program from execution. Errors can either compile time or runtime. A compile time error prevents the code from execution at all. Runtime error results in an exception being raised while code executes. Now we talked about important concepts in Dart and introduction. There are many keywords resolved in Dart programming language. For example, abstract, else, import, show, as, enum, in, static. We will understand all of this later in this video. Assert, export, interface, super, async, extends, is, switch, await, extension, late, sync, break, external, library, this, case, factory, mix and throw, catch, false, new, true, class, final, null, try, const, finally, on, type diff, continue, for, operator, var, covariant, function, part, void, default, get, required, while, deferred, hide, rethrow, with, do, if, return, yield, dynamic, implements, set. Avoid using these words as identifiers because it's reserved keywords. Words with superscript when are contextual keywords. Words with subscript to built-in identifiers. Words with the superscript 3 are limited reserved words related to asynchronous support. All other words in table are reserved words which cannot be identifiers. This is keywords in Dart programming language. Now we will talk about variables. Here an example of creating a variable and initializing it. We go to Dartpad. Here we find var number equal 42. That's what's mean. Variable is changing in our program. Can change. Variable store references. The variable called name contains a reference to a string object with the value of Bob in this example. Another option, we can declare a variable and initialize it in this way or in this way. This is similar to JavaScript, or we can in this way integer number equal 42. Default value. What is default value? And initialized variables that have nullable type have an initial value of null. Null safely optional. If we don't initialize variable, this variable can take null. If we put question exclamation mark, that means accept null. Assert, this is condition about the variable. We return back to our video. Default value initialized variables that have nullable and null safely. Assert, note, production code ignores the assert call during development. On the other hand, assert condition throws an exception if condition is false. For example, see assert. We will talk about it later on this video. If enable null safely, you must initialize the values or add init or start value to variable. For example, 30. If you delete null safety. You don't initialize local variable where it's declared, but you don't need to assign it a value before it's used. For example, we like to count line count lines, else line count 0, print line count what this code result. Let's see. We have problem y undefined. We like to count late variables. For example, here we call var equal false or true, for example. Here the problem solved. Count lines This is function, we call it any way. For example, this value integer return variables. Count line is return, for example, 40. Now we assigned value 40 to line count. If we run this program, we can find 40. Written back, what is late? Late keyword in our civil. Late modifier, which has two use cases, declaring a non-nullable variable that initialized after its declaration. Lazily initializing a variable. Danger. This keyword is danger. If you forget to initialize the variable, you will find error in your program. For example, if we use this code description, if we don't initialize the variable, we find the error. If we run this program, we find late error because we don't initialize the variable. Late means the variable description. We are going to initialize this value later on code before use it. If we run, no problem, but we initialize before use. If you fail to initialize late a variable, a runtime error occurs when the variable is used. This important notice. The variable may be not be needed, and initializing is costly. You are initializing an instance variable, and its initializer needs access to this. This is a program only called to read thermometer, lazily initialized. String temperature, read thermometer. Now we talked about late variables and default value and variables. We move to final and const, important keywords. If you never intend to change a variable, use final or const. Const is equal to let in Swift programming language. For example, either instead of var or in addition to a type, a final variable can be set only once. A const variable is a compile time constant. Const variables are implicitly final. Note, instance variables can be final but not const. Instance variables, we'll talk about it later. Here example, creating setting final variable, final, without a type annotation, final, string nickname Bobby. We call final without type annotation or with type annotation. You cannot change the value of final variable. This is show error. Final variable can only be set once. Use const for variables that you want to be compile time constants. If the const variable is at the class level, mark it static const, where you declare the variable. Set the value to compile time constants such as number or string literal. A const variable or the result of an arithmetic operation on constant variable. Const bar, for example, 1 million unit of pressure. Const stability, standard pressure. The const keyword is not just for declaring constant variable. You can also use it to create constant values in value or in value variable. Let's delete this code. For example, const x equal to 3. If we print x, we find 3. If we need to change the value of x, we find error. Why? Constant variable cannot be assigned a value. If we change this, we can use y, for example, integer y equal x, that constant. If we print y, we find 3. If we need to change y, we are able to change equal 4, for example, no problem and no error. That's the difference between const in value and const in variable. Final can be const equivalent to const. You can omit const from initializing expression of constant declaration like as above. Don't use const redundantly. You can change value of non-final and non-const variable even if it uses to have a const value. You cannot change the value of a const variable. You can define const that use type checks and casts as collection if, separate operators, and const object as integer. We can change. Not all the final object cannot be modified. Its field can be changed. In comparison, a const object, its fields cannot be changed. They are immutable. This important notice between final and const. Built-in types. We talked about variables, default value, late variables, final and const. Importance concepts, introduction about Dart programming language. We move to built-in types. Dart language has special support for following: numbers, integer double, strings, string, booleans, booleans, true or false, lists, list, also known as arrays, sets or set, maps, map, runs, often replaced by the characters API, symbols, symbol with a value and the value null. You can also using literal. For example, this is string, true is a Boolean literal, because variable in Dart refers to an object. All variables refer to an object, instance of a class. Some other types also have special rules in Dart language. Object superclass of all Dart classes except null. Future and streams used asynchrony support. Iterable used in loops and in synchronous generator functions. Never indicate that an expression can never successfully finish evaluating. Most often used for functions that always throw an exception. Dynamic indicators that you want to disable static. The same indicates value that never used, often used as a return type, object or object null or null and null. Classes have special rules to class hierarchy. Top and bottom section, understanding null safely. Let's start. Numbers. Dart numbers come in two flavors, integer, double. Integer, no larger than 64 bits, depending on the platform. Native platforms values can be from 2 notation 63 to 2 notation 63, from -2 positive. On the web, integer values are represented as JavaScript numbers, 64-bit floating point values with no fractional part. It can be form, double, precision, floating point numbers as specified by the IEEE 754 standard. Both integer double are subtypes of num. Apps, CL, Floor, among other methods. Bitwise operators such as integers are numbers without decimal point. Here are some examples defining integer literals. For example, all of this is integer. Integer, no problem. This is problem y. Value of double cannot be assigned to variable of type integer. This is double. This solves the problem. This is double. The same idea. You can declare variable with num plus a sign, pre-decrement. You can refer other courses in our YouTube channel. You can find JavaScript, programming language, Java, Python, PHP, or any other language, programming language in our YouTube channel. We describe all of them in details. The same ideas in Dart programming language, no difference. Programming language concepts are similar. You can refer playlists in our YouTube channel. Double, the same idea. Here how you turn string into number, integer bars or integer tribars. Tribars can accept null to string, here string to double bars. To string as fixed here in decimal points. Round the value. The integer type specified the traditional bitwise shift, complement, and or and XOR operators, which are useful for manipulating and masking flags in bit fields, for example. Bitwise and shift operator section, we will talk it later. Literal numbers and compile time constants, many arithmetic expressions, multiply, plus, minus, add, subtract, division, all of them in numbers and Dart. Now we talked about numbers in Dart. We'll talk about strings. What is strings in Dart programming language? There are many ways to code strings. Dart string holds sequence of UTF-16 code units. You can use either single or double quotes to create string. Single or double quote. You can put value of an expression inside a string using expression, $, curly braces. If the expression is identified, you can skip the curly braces. You get string corresponding an object that calls object to string method. For example, $S, we find it. Or expression in curly braces with $. That's it. The equality operator tests whether two objects are equivalent. Two strings are equivalent if they contain the same sequence of code units. The concatenate strings using adjacent string letters or the plus operator. Adjacent, that's mean string, 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 no problem. Or plus, no problem. Another way to create multi-line string, use triple quote, either single or double quotation marks. Triple quote. You can create a raw string by prefixing it with R. Runs and giving clusters for details on how to express Unicode characters in string. Symbols. Use U, \U with code. No problem. You can find all of them here, almost. These don't work in const string. These work in const string. We find strings and regular expression also. Contains, start with, end with, index of. Substring, split, length, to list, any other, to uppercase, to lowercase, all available. And strings, trim is empty, is not empty. Replacing, replace, and to string, all available. Now we talked about numbers and strings. We move to Booleans. Booleans, true or false. To represent Boolean values, Dart has a type named Boolean, bool. Only two objects have type bool. The Boolean letter is true or false, which are both compiled time constants. Dart type safely means that cannot use code if non-Boolean value or set non-Boolean value instead. Check of none, check for null, check for zero, check for empty string. Now, what is lists? Perhaps the most common collection is nearly every programming language. Here, arrays, in order to group objects in Dart. In Dart language, only three ways of collections: list, set, or map only. List, arrays, or any other. This is list. Set, not refer to sorting items. Maps is key value. What's the difference? Set is most quick, faster than list. Set is faster than list. Map is faster than list. Set not consider ordering. List consider ordering. Map search by key directly. Also, map is fast. Dart list literal look like JavaScript arrays literal. A simple Dart list. Dart infer list has type list integer. If you try to add non-integer object to this list, to initialize a runtime realize it. This is generic data type. You can add comma after the last item. In Dart collection literal, this trailing comma does not affect the collection, but it can help prevent copy-paste errors. If we define this list, no problem. If we print the list, we are both plain. Lists use zero-based indexing, where zero is the index of first value and list length -1 is the index of last value. You can get list length and refer to list value just you want. You would in JavaScript length, for example, print list length, run 3. Or if you want to access by index, no problem. For example, 1, print boot. To create list that compile const before literal, this line will cause error, no changing const. here 3 points that introduce separate operator and the null-aware separate operator, which provide concise way to insert multiple values into collection. For example, you can separate this way 1, 2, 3. List 2 from 0 with list 1, 0, 1, 2, 3. Print list 2. Let's print list 2. We find 0, 1, 2, 3. Expression, that means null, except null. To avoid exception, if we don't define list 1, this is no problem. For example, list var list with no value, this no problem. Print 0. We can also use if, collection if, or for loop in list. For example, this code nav here, if true, for example, outlet, add outlet to list outlet. If false, for example, false, don't add outlet. We can use also for in list. For loop in this way. For loop, list of strings, let's print it. Now we find for loop about this list 0, 1, 2, 3. In list of integers, print hash with value 0, 1, 2, 3. Or we can make it expression plus 1, for example, no problem, 2, 3, 4. If and for more details, generic collection. This is list important data type in Dart programming language. Another is set. Set, what is set in Dart? An ordered collection of unique items. Dart supports it, provided by set literals and set type. This is set, for example, halogene. If we print halogens, no problem. Run, we find set of items. Dart infers that halogens has the type set string. If you try to add the wrong type of value to set, the initializer or runtime raises an error for the information type inference. To create an empty set, use literal or assign to a variable of set. This work also. Create a map not set. Let's create a map not set. Set or map. The syntax for map literals is similar to that for set literals because map literals came first. Curly braces defaults to the map type. If you forget the type annotation on curly braces or the variable it's assigned to, then that creates an object of type map, dynamic. Add items to an existing set using to add the add or add all method. For example, here if the value is existed in set, we don't repeat values in set. Here if we add a fluorine and add all halogens, if we print elements, we don't find two fluorine, one fluorine only. Why? We run one fluorine. Why? Because it existed. Use length to get number of items in set. Length, print length, no problem. 5. Const with set, support separate operators also. Collection if and for, just like lists do. Now we talked about list set, we will talk about map now. Map in general, map is an object that associates keys and values. Both keys and values can be any type of object. Each key occurs only once, but you can use the same value multiple times. Different about set. Set value, not repeat. Here example of map. This example. Key and value any type, no problem. If we print gifts, for example, no problem, print gifts first, second, fifth. We find all lengths, no problem. 3. We find all also 4 or if we here if false print this, run 2, not add this value. Dart map string. You can create the same object using map constructor by this way, key value, by key and value. This way, the same idea. Map string, collection literal when it's possible. That means map, you can use this instead. The same for this. You can use literal by key and value. If you come from a language like C# or Java, you may expect to see new map instead of just map. Enter the new keyword is optional. Adding a new key value. Key value pair. Retrieve value by key. Use length for length of map. Create map that compile time const. Maps support separate operators. The same for set and list. If and for also. This is list set map. Now we will talk about runs and Griffin clusters. Symbols. Dart runs expose the Unicode code points of a string. You can use character package to view or manipulate user perceived characters, also known Unicode. Extended Griffin clusters. Characters, for example. Now In this way, runs and grapheme clusters use Unicode \u with Unicode UTF-16. Characters also you can review here. I with any symbol. Symbols different about runs and grapheme clusters. Symbol object represents operator or identifier declared in the Dart program. You may never need to use symbols, but they are invaluable for API. To get the symbol for identifier, use symbol literal. Just hash followed by identifier radix bar. Now we're back. Functions. Dart is true object-oriented language. So the functions are object and have a type. Function, this means that function can be assigned to a variables or preset as arguments to other functions. You can also call an instance of the Dart class as if it were a function for the callable classes. Here an example, implementing a function is null integer atomic number, return null goes atomic number not equal null. Also, effective Dart recommends type annotation for public API. Function return type. We can use void functions. That means no return. Void. That is main no return type. Is null return for functions that contain just one expression. You can use shorthand syntax. By equal arrow expression, syntax shorthand for return expression. The arrow notation is sometimes referred to as arrow syntax. Only an expression, not a statement, can appear between the arrow and the semicolon. For example, you cannot put an if statement there, but you can use conditional expression. What is parameters? Function can have any number of required positional parameters. These can be followed either by named parameters or by optional positional parameters, but not both. Some APIs notable, Flutter, widget constructor use only named parameters, even for parameters that are mandatory. You can trailing commas when pass arguments to a function or when you define function parameters. Named parameters are optional unless they are specially marked as required. When calling a function, you can specify named parameter using parameter name colon value. For example, enable flags, bold, true, hidden, false. When defining a function, use param1, param2, etc. to specify named parameters. Boolean, bold, Boolean, hidden. If parameter is optional but cannot be null, provide default value. Although named parameter are kind of optional parameter, here is required keyword important. Widget child. If someone tries to create scrollable without specifying the child argument, then analyzer reports an issue. Optional positional parameter. Wrapping a set of function parameters in square brackets marks them as optional positional parameter. Result from this message. If device not null, result with the device, return result. Here an example of calling this function without optional parameter, no problem. And here is an example of calling this function with third parameter. Default parameter value. inside null safely in Dart programming language. If you don't need to required, you can make default parameter values. The function can use equal to define default value for optional parameter. Both named and positional the default value must be compile time constants. For example, bold equal false, hidden equal false. Enable flags bold true. This accepted because hidden equal false initial value. Deprecation note, old code may use a colon instead of equal the default value of named parameter. The reason is that originally only colon was supported for named parameter. That support may be deprecated, so we recommend that use equal to specify default values. This example shows how to set default values for positional parameter. The same idea equal with default value. You can also use list, pass list or map as default values. The following example define a function, do stuff that specify default value, default list for the list parameter, and the default map for gifts parameter. This is function and parameters. The main function is important in Dart. Every app must have a top-level main function which serves as the entry point of the app. The main function return void. This means no return or optional return and has an optional list string parameter for arguments. Here is a simple main function, print hello world. We took it first of our video. An example of the main function for a command line app that takes arguments. Print arguments. You can use arg library to define parse functions as first class object. You can pass a function as a parameter to another function, for example, integer element, print element for each print element. The return value for this is, let's see this example. The return value or the value for this function, we use it in another function. Here, print element integer element, print element. For lists, for each list item, print element. Run, print 1, 2, 3. You can also assign a function to a variable such as message to uppercase, notify message to uppercase. Anonymous function. What is an anonymous function? Most functions are named such as main or print element. You can also create a nameless function called anonymous function, or sometimes lambda or closure. You may assign an anonymous function to a variable so that, for example, you can add or remove it from collection. For example, this function is anonymous. No name for this function. For example, we embed this function into this function. For each item, avoid using for each with function literal. No problem. Text of item 0 apples 1 2. This anonymous function with literal or arrow function, shorthanded function, the same for previous. Lexical scope. What is lexical scope? That is a lexical scope language, which means that the scope of variables is determined statically. Simply by the layout of the code, you can follow the curly braces outwards to see if a variable is in scope. Here is an example. Top level, see this example. Top level true, main, inside main, my function. Inside function, true, nested function, inside function, true, top level, inside main, inside function, inside nested function. That's how nested function can use variable from every level all the way up to the top level. We find lexical closure also. Closure, a function object that has across access to variables in its lexical scope, even when the function is used outside of its original scope. Function make other 2, make other 4. No problem, we can use function outside the void main. Testing function for equality. Here example. For class A static void main A bar comparing static methods. Instance 1 of A, instance 2 of A, equality, assert. Return values. All functions return a value. If no return value is specified, the statement return null, as implicitly append to the function body. This is functions in Dart programming language. What is operators? Dart supports the operators shown as the following table. You can implement many of these operators as class members. Unary operators, plus plus, minus minus, in parentheses, unary prefix, not unary plus plus, minus minus, await, expression, multiplicative, additive, shift, bitwise and bitwise XOR, bitwise or relational, and type test, as is not, equality, equal or not equal, logical and logical or if not, if null, conditional, ternary operator, cascade, assignment, etc. Operator precedence is an absolute approximation of the behavior of Dart parser. For definitive answers, consult the grammar. When you use operators, you create expression. Some examples: a plus plus, a plus b, a equal b equal b. This result true or false. This is assign value of b to a. Ternary operator a is t. Operator table for operators that take two operands. The leftmost operand determines which method is used. For example, if you have vector object and a point object, then a vector plus a point uses vector addition. What is arithmetic operators? What is arithmetic operators in Dart? Dart supports usual arithmetic operators as shown in the following table: add, subtract, unary, minus, also known as negation, reverse the sign of the expression, multiply, divide returning an integer result, get the remainder of an integer division modulo, assert, we have also other postfix, increment and decrement operators, plus plus variable plus plus, minus minus variable minus minus. To understand all of this, you can refer any programming language course in our playlist videos on YouTube channel. For example, JavaScript, PHP, Python, or any programming language. The same idea. For example, integer AB, A0, B, plus plus A, increment A before B gets its value. Increment after B gets value. Decrement before, decrement after. Equality and relational operators: equal, not equal, greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. All of this return false or true. Operators, type test operators, the as is and is not operators are handy for checking times at runtime. As typecast also use it to specify library prefix. Is true if the object has the specified type. Is not true if the object does not have the specified type. Employee as person, first name Bob. Employee is person, check. Is not the same idea. The code is not equivalent if employee is null or not a person. The first example throws an exception, the second does nothing. Assigning operators, we find this assignment operators equal, multiply equal, division equal, left or right, exponential, plus equal, division equal, left or right, shift, or and minus, integer division, compound assignment, equivalent assignment. The same idea. The following example, a multiply 3, 2 multiply 3 equals 6. Logical operators, we find also logical operators, not expression or logical and. Here example, bitwise and shift operators and or XOR unary bitwise complement, shift left, shift right, unsigned shift right. Conditional expression, this is one line, conditional expression. For example, visibility is public or private. Let's see what this could result. Is public true, visibility. Let's print visibility. This result in public. Run public is to change to false. This print private. Now null, check this example. For example, two question mark means if this existed, print this, not existed, print default value. Cascade notation, the same idea. Cascade notation with text, if text null, use its member. Syntax requires at least 2.12 version of Dart SDK. The previous code equivalent to the following: button text classes had on click listen. You can nest cascade, for example. Be careful. Construct cascade function returns object. Other operators function application presents function call. Subscript access represents a call to overridable operator. Conditional subscript access, member access or accessors. Conditional member access, null assertion operator. This come in last of the line. Cast expression to its underlying non-nullable type, throwing a runtime exception if the cast fails. Example: assert foo is non-null and selects the property bar, unless foo is null, in which case a runtime expression is thrown. Now we talked about operators, functions, built-in types, and variables, and some introduction of Dart programming language. We move to control flow statement. We have many of it in Dart programming language. We have if else, we have for loops, while and do while loops, break, continue, switch case, and assert. We'll talk about exceptions, try catch, and throw later. If and else, Dart supports if and else statement with optional else statement as the next sample shown. Let's see this. Is raining, you bring raincoat. Else if is snowing, wear jacket. Else put hook down. Unlike JavaScript, conditions must use Boolean values, nothing else. Boolean values. For loops, you can if is public, for example, print public, the same idea to ternary operator. Else what code executed if this condition not true. Print private only. Print private. We don't need visibility, otherwise that's it. Run private. We can also use else if with condition and nested if else statements. For loops, the same. You can iterate with standard for loop, for example, for I write message, it closes inside Dart for loops, capture the value, avoiding common pitfall found in JavaScript. For example, consider I equals 0, I less than 2, I plus plus. That was 0 and 1. You can use for in within keyword form iteration. This is similar to for each. The same idea to practice using for in. For each, we have for in and for each and regular for loop. While and while, a while loop evaluate condition. Here, if we type for var I in, for example, 10, here we need to define value integer, for example, integer x equal 10. Here type x, print I, here x, use it for loop, must implement iterable. For I equal 0, for example, I less than x, I plus plus print x 0 from 0 to 9. While the same idea, but we don't know how much we loop or iterate while syntax. The difference between for loop and while loop. For we know how much iteration loops. While we don't know. While, what is the difference between while and do while? While don't necessarily do this function inside while condition, but do while and or we do this function one time at minimum. Do while loop evaluate condition after the loop. Break and continue. What is break and continue? Break from keyword, break the while loop and go outside while. Continue, skip one iteration to next iteration. You may write that example differently. Iterable, switch and case. What is switch and case? Command, execute pending, execute closed, break, execute approved, denied, open, execute unknown. Command open, error missing, break. Why? For example, omit break statement in case, close, first generate an error. Command runs for both closed and now closed because no break after case. If really want for throw, continue executing at the now closed label. Case close can have local variables which are visible only inside the scope of that clause. Assert. What is assert? Important keyword. During development, use an assert statement, assert condition, optional message to disrupt normal execution if Boolean condition is false. You can find example of assert statement throughout this tower. Here are some more. Assert text not equal null. Make sure variable has no null value. Assert number less than 100. Assert URL starts with HTTPS and many uses of assert. To attach a message, HTTP URL string should start with HTTPS. First argument to assert can be any expression that resolves to a Boolean value. If expression's value is true, the assertion succeeds, and execution continues if it's false. The assertion fails and expression an assertion error is thrown. When exactly do assertion work? That depends on the tool framework you are using. Flutter enable assertions in debug mode. Development only tools such as Dart devs typically enable assertions by default. Some tools such as Dart Run and Dart2JS support assertion through command line flag enable assertions. In production code, assertions are ignored and the arguments to assert are not evaluated. Now we talked about control flow statements. If and else, for loops, while and while, break, continue, switch and case, and assert. We talked about many issues in Dart programming language: introduction, variables, built-in types, runs and functions, and operators, and control flow statements. Now we move to exceptions. What is exceptions or defensive programming? How we code it in Dart programming language. Your Dart code can throw and catch exceptions. Exceptions are errors indicating that something unexpected happened. If the exception is not caught, the isolate that raised exception is suspended, and typically the isolate and its program are terminated. In contrast to Java, all Dart's exceptions are unchecked. Exceptions method don't declare which exception they may throw, and you are not required to catch any exception. Dart provides exception and error types as well as numerous predefined subtypes. You can, of course, define your own exceptions. However, Dart programs can throw any non-null object, not just exception and error object as an exception. Exceptions: deferred load exception, format exception, integer division by zero exception, terminated, IO exception, isolates bound exception, null rejected exception, OS error, timeout exception. Errors also: abstract class instantiation error, argument error, assertion error, async error, concurrent modification error, forward errors, unimplemented error, unsupported error, type error, state error, stack overflow error, remote error, out of memory error, null thrown error, no such method error, any other. You can refer in Dart. Throw, here is an example: throwing or raising an error, format exception. You can also throw arbitrary object. At least one section. Here example: run, throw exception. Production quality code usually throws types that implements error or exceptions. Throw, distance to point other, throw an implemented error. Catch, what is catch? Catching or capturing an exception stops the expression from propagating unless you rethrow the exception. Catching an exception gives you a chance to handle it. Try on or try on catch. You can use multi-on, catch one. Out of Lilmos exception, buy more Lilmos, breed more Lilmos. Unknown exception, something really unknown. Try exception details. Stack trace. You can define your own exception by through class try on catch exception, partially hand exception or propagate, rethrow keyword, allow callers to see the exception, misbehave, trifodynamic, void callable. Here we write this code, run code, misbehave partially handled JS such method error, main finish it handling JS such method error. Read through the same, repeat. Finally, what is finally in exceptions? Try finally to ensure that some code runs whether or not an exception is thrown. Use finally close if no catch clause matches the exception. The exception is propagated after the finally clause runs. Always clean up even if an exception is thrown. Finally, error, handle exception error, then clean up. We talked about exceptions. Now we move to classes. As we talked before, Dart is object-oriented language. Dart is an object-oriented language with classes and mixed-based inheritance. In other programming language, we find in Swift, for example, protocol. Protocol equal to mixins with keyword in Dart language. Every object is an instance of a class, and all classes except null descend from object. Mixin-based inheritance means that although every classes here in classes in Dart, we find extends for inheritance, and implements for interface implement. We don't find keyword interface, we find abstract for interface. All of these keywords in object-oriented programming, to understand more, you find all of these terms. Inheritance, we find implements, class implements. What's the difference between implements and or extends and implement? Extends for one class. Class A extends class B, only one. But implements may be one or more. For example, class A implements class B, C, and D, for example, but not extends more than one class. To resolve or to solve this problem, we find make sense is equal to protocol in soft programming language, for example. Make sense class A extends class B with keyword with is with class B, C, etc. Using class members. For example, here we find delete this. We define any class, for example, class A, for example, class animal. Here we define abstract. Abstract, that means this is interface. We can define attributes and methods. For example, Boolean is alive equal true. Here in abstract, no problem. By true, we don't need true, only undefined name. We assign value true. We define methods, for example, eat, string eat, for example, eat, that means a function or method. Define another string, another method. Move, for example, with no return value because it's abstract or interface. This is three methods. We make another class. For example, class birds, for example. Bird extends animal. Now we have error. Why? Because eat and move not implemented. We use implements. Now use override eat, for example, string eat, override string eat, return string. That is what string for bird. Knock knock, for example. And another override for move. For move function. Move. In this way, we find undefined name E, Y, correct name to one that defined. Missing concrete implementation. Guitar animals is alive and sitter is alive. In this way, you can write this alive is alive equal true. Is alive equal true, that means we have overridden numbers. We need here to define override before is alive. No problem. Positional argument. Here we define, for example, birds, for example, equal bird. We assign values to bird. For example, we assign values, eat, for example, another move, for example. Anyway, print bird to string we have now if we print bird, we find compilation error, variable must declare it because using const final variable or type of name variable, for example, if we use, for example, bird eat and print bird move, for example, move, fly, fly. And fly, run, eat, and move. Knock, knock, fly, fly. Let's see another implement for instance or interface animal. Let's define const, for example. This is static field, cannot be declared. Another way, variable must be declared. Variable can name keyword var. Var. Now before run this code, we define another implementation of animal cat, the same attributes and methods. We constructor or define copy of this class cat and bird, assign values and print the result. Run knock knock fly fly meow meow hash hash. This is implementation. Now if we want to extend for example here define a class, for example chicken extends bird here we find chicken extends bird. All of these properties we find here without any code of this. Knock knock fly fly. If we want to change this function, for example, we can override move to Coco, for example, not fly, move. For chicken, we define another value, for example, integer, any other value, for example, integer, weight, For example, integer weight 10. We define chicken here. Chicken. If we try to chicken, if we try to access any properties, we can find it. Chicken, if we print chicken, we find all of properties in it. Weight is alive, eat, move, any other properties. Let's see. Print is alive, weight, for example, move, eat, for example, move. Run this code and see what's the result. 2 is alive, weight 10, knock. This is classes and object-oriented in Dart, in short. Using class member dot operator instead using constructors, same idea. Also new, no need to new, constructors, immutable point, const omit, getting an object type, runtime type. If we print this, for example here, we print bird dot runtime type. Here we find the name. Let's do it first. The same bird, cat, and chicken. Run bird. See here bird, not chicken. Why? Bird is bird, eat and fly. Cat is bird. Cat implements animal is bird. Runtime or bird. We need to define the name. Cat, chicken, runtime chicken. Run this bird, cat, chicken. That's true. Runtime type, instance variables, the same. We took it. Declare instance, declare relational, nullable. Date time now. Factory constructor. Factory, what mean by factory? Factory constructor, late, be careful. Factory constructor, the same as implementing of interface. Here we find logger, implement the interface of logger, I find catch put if absence name logger internal name factor from JSON and internal let's name this is factory. Factory implementation of interface in class. Constructors. What is constructors? The same idea. Constructors. This keyword, the way to do this. Stay tuned. This x equal x. This y equal y. Implement. Not use this only when there is the name conflict. Otherwise, Dart style omits this. Pattern. Point this. Syntax suitable for setting x and y before the constructor body runs. Default constructors are not inherited. Name it constructors. We find also set and get for classes and constructors. Initial list, initializer list, superclasses, no args constructor, main class, no args constructor. If you run this code in person employee instance of employee, person from JSON in person, employee in employee extends person. In main employee from JSON, print employee, prints in person employee, instance of employee. Warning arguments to the superclass constructor don't have access to this. For example, arguments can call static methods but not instance methods. Initializer list. A set warning the right hand side of an initializer does not have access to this. Assert. Redirecting constructor. Constant constructor. Another way to handle late initialization of a final variable is to use late final carefully. Factory constructor have no access to this. Invoke methods. What is methods? Are functions that provide behavior for an object. Instance methods. This distance 2. This is methods. Operators. Operators are instance methods with special names, plus, minus, division. We discussed it before. You may have noticed that some operators like not equal are not in the list names and are not in the list of names. That's because they are just syntax sugar. For example, expression is sugar for not equal. The same. Operator, getter and setter. We talk about this. Getter and setter for hide information in class. For example, let's define class A. We define variables, integer, variables age, for example, equal 25. Delete all of this, don't need. Here we call get, integer get, value equal age. You don't need if you is already in Dart, get and set. This is already existed. But if you want to change the value, you can change. If you want to set the same idea, set value with integer value, integer v, return age equal v, this is return to our code main a equal a, if we call value here equal to 30, print a value, run this code, we find 30. But if we don't use this, also this, we find 25. That's it. This is getter and setter. Operators such increment, decrement, all of this, abstract classes talked about. This is equal to interface in other programming languages. Factory implement interface or abstract. Implicit interfaces. Implements keyword. We talked about. You can implement many interfaces or abstracts classes, extending a class one class. if you need to extend more than one class, you need to use extend with or mixins in Dart, override, and if you override equal, you should also override object hash code getter. For example, overriding equal and hash code. Implementing map key. No such method. This is unless you override no such method using a non-existing member result in no such method error. You cannot invoke an implemented method unless one of the following is true. The receiver has a static type dynamic. The receiver has a static type that defines the unimplemented method. Abstract is okay. The dynamic type of the receiver has an implementation of no such method. That's different from the one in class object. Extension method, the same. Enumerated types. Enumerated types in object-oriented programming. Here we find, for example, enum color, red, blue, white, red, green, blue. Can't be used as identifier because it's a keyword. Enum we define out of the main class color. Then we define color equal color enum cannot be instantiated. Color. If we print color, we find this values. Print color. With operator, we find color name to string, no such method invocation, runtime type. For example, non-nullable local variable color must be assigned before it can be used. Color, for example here, color runtime type. Non-nullable local variable must be assigned before it can be used. Equal color return to enum. List colors, color value, set color, switch statement, a color blue. For example, variable color equal color dot blue, green, red, and this. For example, blue. If we print color, you find it is color type. If we print color is blue. You cannot subclass mix in or implement an enum. You cannot explicitly instantiate an enum. Adding features to class mixins with keyword with. With you can extend more than one class. can also use on extends Musician with Musician Performer. Class variables and methods. Capacity. Static variables are not initialized until they are used. Note lower camel case preferred for constant names. Static methods. What is the static methods? Class methods don't operate on an instance and thus don't have access to this. They do, however, have access to static variables, as the following example shows. You invoke static methods directly on a class. Note, consider using top-level functions instead of static methods for common or widely used utilities and functionalities. We talked about classes in Dart programming language. We talked about multi things, control flow statement, exceptions. We talked about operators, functions, built-in types, variables, and keywords, and some introduction about Dart programming language. We move to generics. What is generics in Dart programming language? If you look at the API documentation for basic array type list, you will see that type is actually a list of type E. The notation marks list as a generic or parenthesized type, a type that has formal type parameters. By convention, most type variables have single letter names such as E, T, S, K, and G. Why use generics? Generics are often required for type safety, but they have more benefits than just allowing your code to run. Properly specifying generic types, use generics to reduce code duplication. Strings you can declare as list of string. Leave that list of string. That way your fellow arguments, programmers, and your tools can detect that assigning a non-string to the list is probably a mistake. Here's an example. Another reason for using generics to reduce code duplication. String, generic collection and types they contain. Note, in contrast, generics in Java use eraser, which means that generic type parameters are removed at runtime. In Java, you can test whether an object in a list, but you cannot test whether it's list string. You can refer Java playlist course in our YouTube channel for more information or for more description. Restricted the parameterized type extends, for example, T extends object. T extends some base class, foo some base class, extender. It's okay, specify to generic argument. Specifying any nonce-basic class type results in an error. Using generic methods. The same. T of T-list. Using generic methods. Initially, that generic support was limited to classes. A newer syntax called generic methods allows type arguments on methods and functions. Here, generic type parameters on first T allows you to use the type argument T in several places. In the function return type, in the type of an argument list type, in the type of local variable T10. Libraries and visibilities. Import and export and extend. Import library if you are curious why Dart uses underscores instead of access modified keywords like public, private. CSDK issues. Using libraries. How to use libraries. Use import to specify how to namespace from one library is used in the scope of another library. For example, web apps generally use Dart.html, import Dart.html. Or package test Dart. No problem, requires keyword import. Package name, the package if you specify. URI stands for Uniform Resource Identifier. URLs, Uniform Resource Locators. Are a common way, a common kind of URI. Specifying URI prefix by aliasing as live2, for example. You can use it live2. Importing only part of a library. Show foo, hide foo. You can use this. Easily loading a library. Differing loading, also called lazy loading, allows a web app to load a library on demand. If and when the library is needed, here are some cases when you may use deferred loading to reduce a web app's initial startup time, to perform A/B testing, trying out alternative implementation of an algorithm, for example, to rarely use functionality such as optional screens and dialogues. Only Dart2.js supports deferred loading. Flutter, the Dart VM, and Dart Diff C don't support deferred loading. To lazily load the library, you must first import it using default as hello. When you need the library, invoke load library using the library identifier. Library await hello. Load library, for example, hello greeting. You need to alias keyword. Everything code await keyword pauses execution until the library is loaded. Here await async default as asynchronous support. You can invoke load library multiple times on library without problems. Library is loaded only once. Keep in mind the following when you use default loading. Default library constants are constants in the importing file. Remember, these constants don't exist until the default library is loaded. You cannot use types from a default library in the importing file. Instead, consider moving interface types, a library imported by both the default library and importing file. That implicitly inserts load library into the namespace that you define using default as namespace. The function returns a future. Implementing libraries, set create library package, including how to organize library source code, how to use the export directive, when to use BART directive, when to use library directive, how to use conditional imports and exports to implement directory that support multiple platforms. Asynchrony support, we talked about generics, we talked about classes, Dart programming language, exceptions, control flow statement, operators, functions, built-in types, variables, keywords, important concepts, and introduction about Dart programming language. We will talk about asynchrony support future stream. In short, async await keyword support asynchronous programming, letting you to write asynchronous code that looks similar to synchronous code. That's different from thread in other programming language. When you need the result of completed feature, you have two options. Use async await as described and in the synchronous programming code lab. Use the future API as described. Code that async and await is asynchronous, but it looks a lot like asynchronous code. For example, here is some code that uses wait to wait for the result of an asynchronous function. To use await, code must be in async function and function marked as async. Use await. Not although an async function may perform time-consuming operations, it does not wait for those operations. Instead, the async function executes only until it encounters its first await expression. Then it returns a future object, resuming execution only after the await expression completes. Try catch, and finally, handle errors and clean up in code that uses await. No problem. Await, interpoint, async, for example, await, and await expression, async, await. In main, declaring async function. The preceding example uses a async function check version without waiting for a result, a practice that can cause problems if the code assumes that the function has finished execution. To avoid this problem, use an awaited feature linter all. An awaited Now declaring async function, string version, async before return, handling streams, async await for. If you go to compile time error when implementing an asynchronous for loop, make sure the await for is an async function. Generators sync *6 synchronous asynchronous. Synchronous generator returns a retrievable object. Asynchronous returns a stream object. Yield asynchronous here, stream here retrievable. This is the difference. Async yield callable classes. If you run this code, hi there gang. One of the functions string A, B, C print with each other. One of the function hi there gang. Print out. This is generics and callable classes. Generators, asynchrony support. We move to isolates. What is isolate? Most computers, even on mobile platform, have multi-core CPU. To take advantage of all those cores, developers traditionally use shared memory threads. Running concurrency, however, shared state concurrency is error-prone and can lead to complicated code. Instead of threads, all Dart code runs inside isolates. Each Dart isolate has a single thread of execution and shared no mutable objects with other isolates. Type diffs. Type alias, often called type diff because it's declared with the keyword type diff, is a concise way to refer to a type. Here's an example declaring and using a type of alias named integer list. Type diff integer list of integer list 1, 2, 3. Type alias can have type parameter. List mapper x map x list x. Type diff. Before 2.13, type diffs were restricted to function types. Using the new type diffs requires language version to at least 2.13. We recommend using inline function types instead of type diffs for functions in most situations. However, function type diffs can still be useful. Type diffs compared to integer function TATB. Sort, main, use it. What is metadata? Use metadata to give additional information about your code. A metadata annotation begins with the character at, followed by either reference to compile time constants such as deprecated or a call to constant constructor. 3 annotations are available to all Dart code: deprecated, and override. For example, using override, we talked about in object-oriented classes before. Deprecated was turn on instead. You can define your own metadata annotation. Here is an example: define to do annotation that takes 2 arguments: to do who what, then who what. Do something, to do. Metadata can appear before library, class, type diffs, type parameters, constructor, factory, function, field, parameter, or variable declaration, and before an import. This is way or export directive. You can retrieve metadata at runtime using reflection. We talked about many things. Introduction about Dart, keywords, variables, built-in types, functions, operators, control flow statements, exceptions, classes, generics, asynchrony support, libraries and visibility, and generators, callable classes, isolates, type diffs, metadata. Now we talked the last section in our video, comments. What is comments? How we use it? Dart supports single line comments, multi-line comments, and documentation comments. Single line comments only as this slashes, 2 slashes. If we need to multi-line comments, slash aesthetics or star, we close by the same. This way, commented is good. Multi-line, if we need to document code, documentation code 3. Documentation comments are multi-line or single-line comments that begin with 3 slashes or slash with 2 asterisks on consecutive lines have the same effect as multi-line documents comments. Inside the documentation comment, the analyzer ignores all text unless it is included in brackets. Using brackets, you can refer to classes, methods, fields, top-level variables, functions, and parameter. The names in brackets are resolved in the lexical scope of the documented program element. This is an example. Here an example documentation. Here another way in this class-generated documentation becomes linked to the documents feed, becomes linked to documents food. Another way to parse Dart code and generate HTML documentation, you can use Dart documentation generation tool, Dart doc, for an example generated documentation. Dart programming language, more features. Algorithms in Dart. Also, you can find on Amazon. If you need technology, you can refer to Udemy course we publish on Udemy. And that's it, Dart programming language. Short tour of the runs and graphs, clusters, symbols. We talked about functions, parameters, the main functions as first class object, anonymous function, lexical scope, lexical closures, testing functions for quality, return values. We talked about operators, arithmetic operators, equality and relational operator, type test operators, assignment operators, logical operators, and bitwise and shift operators, conditional expressions, cascade notation, other operators. We talked about control flow statement, if and else, for loose, while, break and continue, switch and case assert. We talked about exceptions, throw, catch, finally, classes using class members, using constructors, getting an object's type, instance variables, constructor methods, abstract classes. We talked about implicit interfaces, extending a class, extension methods, enumerated types, adding features to class makes sense, class variables and methods. We talked about generics, why use generics, using collection literals, using parameterized type, and we talked about generic collection and the types they contain, restricted, parameterized type, using generic methods, libraries and visibility, using libraries, implementing libraries. We talked also about asynchrony, support, handling features, declaring async functions, handling streams, generators, callable classes, isolates, type diffs, and aliases. We talked about metadata, comments, for example, single line comment, multi-line comment, documentation comments. This is Dart programming language, easy to use, and you can fast learn it. If you code with any programming language other like Java, Swift, Kotlin, Objective-C, C#, Python, PHP, any other programming language, you can easily learn Dart programming language. Dart programming language is modern Dart programming language used by Flutter technology. This is by Google company, produced now. Latest version Dart SDK 2.16. This is video about Dart programming language. I am engineer Mouaz AlShahmeh, software engineer developer. I have 5 years experience, about 5 years experience of Flutter technology and Dart language. Here we go. You practice Dart programming language. It's easy to use. Practice this programming language in Dartpad or any IDE program, for example, Visual Studio Code or Android Studio, IntelliJ, Xcode, any IDE other. And peace upon you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.